Okay, now we segue to the easy part of the program, which is landing on the moon. And our annual visit from my old pal, Bob Richard, is, there you are. Yeah. And with him comes another old acquaintance, Jonathan Weintraub. You there? Okay. Who is with Space.il, the Israeli company that came within a few feet of landing on the moon only, what is it, a month ago, 6 weeks ago?
They did land.
They
Just
did?
very quickly.
Yes, they did
You're on
land.
the moon.
They did land.
Yes.
And so this part of the agenda is called Moon, Mars, and Beyond, because we will also hear by beam from Pascal Lee, who is a Mars specialist, to tell us how soon we're going to get there and what we're going to do when we get there. So can you pick up this narrative? And
I think so.
You look great.
Well, so do you.
Okay.
20 years and you're still going strong.
Still going strong.
Yes.
And just to remind you all, Bob is the head of a project called Moon Express, and Moon Express wants to be the first trucking company that can land payloads onto the moon and deliver payloads from the moon. I tried to convince him to call it the Ace Trucking Company, but they didn't go for it. Bob heads up this significant effort. The company was a serious contender for the Lunar XPrize, and full disclosure, I am a very minor shareholder, but a big booster.
And a huge in my heart.
Thank you very much, Bob. You care.
And what a wonderful privilege it is to follow two of the most amazing people I've ever known in my life, Martine and Moses. Martine just makes me proud to be human. Don't you think? And how do you follow that? In our journey as human beings, we have a destiny that began for many of us during the days of Apollo, when nation states were competing for technological supremacy and to win or to lose, and out of fear, and a lot of these things that are closer to our brain stem than our cerebellum. And here we are 50 years later, transitioning as a species into a much more important future, one that is actually, I think, better embodying us as a species, where we are expanding the economic sphere of Earth and the social sphere of Earth beyond the boundaries of the planet that we have inhabited as humans for perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, but our predecessors for millions. And we're transitioning as a species by taking a large part of the planetary DNA with us. So we are helping life itself evolve into the universe. And we might be the first ones. It's a large thought. Somebody has to be first. Maybe there's millions of civilizations that have made this transition. Maybe not. We only have one example of genesis of life and intelligence so far. That's right here. And one of the advantages we have as an intelligent species on this planet is we have another planet very close by. If we were Polynesians with technology that included paddles and boats, and we wanted to go exploring across the ocean, and we saw an island on the horizon, that's where we'd go, right? It's kind of two-dimensionally. We'd paddle there and then see what was beyond. So if you think of it three-dimensionally, and if you think of the Earth as a globe and the moon as the next island in space, kind of a planetary archipelago, that's where we go. You know, it's the first step outward as a species. And even more fortunate, the moon is actually a body in space that has a lot of important resources that we can use as a species as we go out. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the importance of going to the moon and using it as a stepping stone for our evolution as a species. I talked about the Apollo program and how the motivations for it were perhaps not, we won't be as proud about those motivations. However magnificent those accomplishments were as a species, those are magnificent things that we did. But the motivations of going out into space as we transcend this adolescence we've had on the planet and being harmful to each other and the planet itself, we need to go out to space and beyond, the moon and to Mars and beyond, as a mature species, where we bring the better parts of us with us, the love, the aspirations, the inclusiveness, all the things that I think are embodied by the younger generations that we have today than the older generations that first ventured out. Moon Express, we are inventing these robots that are pretty intelligent, that can land on, they're like scouts. They go and they land on the moon and they discover things, and then the humans will follow. And these landers that we're building at Moon Express get bigger and bigger, and we eventually want to mine the moon, harvest those resources, bring resources back to Earth, not just for scientific purposes, but there are useful things in the moon. There's a lot of water on the moon, which actually is an enabling substance for us, not just for water to drink and to breathe, but if you break it into its constituents, hydrogen and oxygen, it becomes rocket fuel. So in this animation you're seeing behind, it's looking at the mechanics of going and getting, bringing back to Earth. And these are the very first days of us exploring a whole new world and learning how to live offshore, how to live in these other worlds. And this will lead to a permanent human presence in the moon as we evolve as a planetary species. And we're going to learn how to live off-world, in our backyard. But this is a stepping stone to Mars. And as I introduce Mars, I want to introduce a friend of mine who has a robotic presence right now. I don't know if you can actually move, Pascal. Are you movable? Can you drive?
I'm a little bit impaired, but
can I help you? Can we help him over?
That would be good.
This. Okay, we'll bring out. So, Moon Express has a daily shuttle from the moon to Earth. Pascal missed it. He was supposed to be on this morning's shuttle, so he's on the moon. And we're able to, through the magic of technology, through beaming, able to talk to Pascal. And you might notice that there's a little bit of a delay as we talk because there's about a light second between the Earth and the moon, so it takes about that long to get there. Is that right, Pascal?
Yes, that's correct. So you're probably hearing me with a bit of delay. Hi, everybody. Sorry I cannot be there with you in person. Toronto is just too far away to reach, and I missed the launch window.
But I know that you do love dogs, and I think you have your dogs with you there, and we do have a dog mining on the moon behind us in the visualization here. This is our new technology of how we're going to dig for our resources on the moon. Pascal, you're also... Yes, go ahead.
I have a short video to show today that was filmed on Devon Island in your beautiful Canada last summer. And Devon Island is this place we have been going to every summer, at least for me, for the past 23 years. And it's one of the most Mars-like and Moon-like places on Earth. And so without further ado, I just want to share with you some of the beauties of the site and the work we do there.
The first time we arrived on Devon Island, we landed in this plane. The team was very small, we were just 4 people. And I was just completely taken aback by how Mars-like the whole landscape was.
Especially when you're flying in, it looks just like the moon base. The land is desolate.
We had to take 7 flights to get here. It's a really tough undertaking, but it's extremely fascinating.
This is a place that is barren.
Vast, intimidating.
You're rambling through areas that are quite dangerous.
It's isolated and remote and rocky, just like the surface of Mars is.
I think someday there will be humans walking on Mars, definitely.
My guess is that the first people who land on Mars will say something to the effect, oh wow, this looks just like Devon Island, where we trained. My name is Pascal Lee. I'm a planetary scientist. I work with the Mars Institute and the SETI Institute. Devon Island is the world's largest uninhabited island. It's cold, dry. I call this place Mars on Earth. We find exactly the same looking canyons, valleys, and gullies here.
It's just very desolate and empty of everything. Here, there's no road to go back to.
There are no streets, but there'll be street view. My name is Katya Minitenko, and I am working on all things related to Mars and Google, sort of bridging the two things.
We have an amazing team from Google. We are adding our base camp and our surroundings to Google Street View.
We're going to be able to see it and welcome everybody to Mars.
I've been associated with Pascal ever since we began this project back in 1996. As camp manager, I'm responsible for the smooth running of camp and getting all of the equipment up and running and operating smoothly. So one of the first things I do when I get up in the morning is start the generators, start the water pump, and sometimes I cook breakfast.
All right, dig in.
In the meantime, the people in camp are just starting to wake up.
Yeah, we've been getting up at 6 every morning. Steve and I and John.
Wake up every morning, brush your teeth, give yourself a bath using baby wipes. You go to breakfast, you're constantly covered in many layers, you're wearing gloves. It is the high Arctic, so temperature is always down right around freezing. I've been helping out with the Humvees, working on those, and it's a new experience for me.
I'm David North, and I'm an engineer at the NASA Langley Research Center. I'm happy to be part of the science and research that will someday lead to a younger generation landing on Mars.
Altitude 502 feet.
There's something on the other side of the hill there, too. You see this is green stuff over there?
It's very difficult to fly on Mars because the atmosphere is so thin. So the trick is to make your vehicle very light. And this vehicle is a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. And the idea there is there are no prepared runways on Mars, so you have to land in such a way that you can land in rough terrain or terrain that doesn't allow for rolling landings. Tipping over is definitely an issue for this aircraft. So there's one of the things we're learning about this aircraft is maybe the wheelbase needs to be a little bit bigger, particularly if it's a robotic aircraft and there's no one there to fly it.
I bring my dog up here because he has a very specific role. We are in the Arctic. We're not at the top of the food chain. It's the polar bear that's at the top of the food chain. And so we have a dog here as part of our bear wildlife deterrent system. The hope is that my dog would be able to sniff out a bear and not attack it, but distract the bear and buy us a little more time. The science is only part one of our work. The other part is we're learning how to explore. Okay, so today we're going to Astronaut Canyon. It's spectacular and it's really very similar in morphology to what we see on Mars. It takes about 2.5 hours to get there.
I think this could be one of our panos for the Voyager story.
We're going to be out on an ATV ride and heading far away from the habitat, and all around you, 360 degrees, you would see nothing but rocks.
So the way you would explore Mars is driving your ATV wearing a spacesuit, and while you're riding, you're connected to your reserves so that they will recharge the oxygen tanks and the batteries in your backpack. Your ATV would be a self-driving robot that would follow you in your exploration on foot.
This is why we're here.
It has exactly the profile, the slopes, the topography, if you will, of some of the canyons we see on Mars.
I am actually collecting 7 to 10 panoramas to create a Voyager story.
It's not just spending money to build a rocket and train people and build hardware and fly to Mars with the fuel. It's the fact that this will galvanize an entire new generation of people to go into science.
We're standing where
Pascal, we've been working in space science for a long time. We've done Mars missions together. We've done moon missions together. There's kind of a dichotomy in the community between is it moon or is it Mars? How do you respond to that?
Oh, I think at this point we really have to go back to the moon before we go back to Mars. It's not really an engineering requirement to go back to the moon before you go to Mars. It's more of a geopolitical one, really. I think we have to bear in mind that if you look at the history of exploration, nations don't explore to satisfy scientific curiosity. As noble and as inspiring as science might be to some of us, and even many people, what justifies the expenditure of tax dollars is usually our security, our preeminence, our leadership, and in particular, our need to not fall behind when it comes to technology. So I often say that James Cook was not sent to the South Pacific because the British Navy was interested in botany, but because the French were roaming the southern seas as well. And President Kennedy did not send Americans to the moon in the mid-60s because we were interested in lunar science. We went to the moon because the United States had to beat the Soviet Union at something in space. And that was to put a man on the moon and return him safely before the end of the decade. So if you really analyze what justified the expenditure of large amounts of resources for exploration, typically it's actually national interest, geopolitics. It's not as inspiring as the desire to explore and wonder out there. Now, this is even true for Antarctica today. We have many countries that have stations there. These stations cost a lot to run, but what motivates our presence in these places is geopolitics. But once you've committed to being in places like Antarctica, like the moon, what else is there to do but science? You're not going to open a law firm or a restaurant quite yet. You do science, and so science dominates the activity that you carry out at these places. But it's not really the root cause, the root motivation of us being there. And I wish we all became a more noble society globally to really explore for the sake of exploration. And certainly you, Bob, I know that's what powers you and Moon Express. And so I really salute your efforts in that regard.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And we do have an interesting transformation happening right now with the moon. We do have geopolitics. China's on the moon. U.S. is definitely dedicated to going back to the moon or going forward to the moon. Many countries, small to large, are going to the moon, including Canada. Thank you, Canada, for coming to the moon with us. But the way that this is going to play out is not certain. And the other, it's not just government players anymore, as you pointed out. There's also commercial players, like Moon Express and others. SpaceX, everybody knows, is transforming the way that, and the cost of getting from the surface of the Earth into space, with a large aspiration of getting to Mars. And what we're seeing with Moon Express and other companies is that economic engine going outward, collapsing the cost, but that translates into democratizing access. It's not just monolithic government organizations, which have these kind of binary outcomes of fear or war and peace, but much more synthesized humanity when you get so many people able to go. So that's
exactly it. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly it. And I think that we're about to live a golden age of space exploration when accessing space and doing things on private terms has finally become possible. And so this is going to really open up the range of things we do and the motivations that we put behind the things we do out in space. And you, Bob, with the entire burgeoning, pioneering private industries that is trying to access space or wanting to access space or is accessing space, are going to really open the floodgates to every human being being able to one day aspire to travel.
I sure hope so, Pascal. And here we are on the 50th anniversary year of Apollo 11 landing on the moon. How many people in this audience were actually alive when Apollo 11 in 1969? There are a lot of hands in this audience. The Apollo generation, which was really personified with this right stuff, heroics, our friend Buzz Aldrin. And I think and that was really important, Moses, but I think what's happening today is we have the Artemis generation. Apollo had a twin sister named Artemis. And the US is dedicated now to the Artemis program to put the first woman on the moon. And in doing so, I think bringing our humanity with us, of inclusiveness and love and all those things that kind of weren't there during the political race during the 60s and 70s. I think the young generation today is a much better generation, and I think we're going to be a much better species going out as the Artemis generation going forward. Thank you very much, Pascal, for joining us from the moon.
I agree.
Oh, don't go away.
Yeah, can I just clarify this controversy about whether or not the next logical step is to create a space station around the moon or to land on the moon and create the space station on the surface of the moon? Can you explain that to me? Did he hear me?
Yeah, Pascal, I'm going to pass that hot potato to you. Who wants to go to the surface?
All right,
we want to go to the surface. That's where we want to explore, yeah. But there are merits to having a facility in orbit as well. We want to understand better, for example, deep space radiation, and also the sustainability and survival of hardware in a radiation environment. So it's not just on living beings, but also on hardware that we would gain by being really in orbit around the moon as opposed to being at the surface where radiation is a bit reduced.
So who's arguing for which option?
NASA's planning to put a space station around the moon and then be able to access the surface. Moon Express and other companies are just going, we can't afford a space station. We're just going to go directly right to the surface and take scientists like Pascal with, well, their instruments with us, eventually themselves.
But that's just an economic consideration.
It is.
It's not a scientific consideration or
correct.
A spiritual consideration.
Correct.
Okay. So getting on the surface.
I feel that if we had to choose between the two, it would be a base on the moon, because you really have to occupy the moon in order to explore it in detail. And there's much to explore. But in reality, the optimal solution is to have both a base on the moon and an orbiting station around the moon.
All of the above.
Okay.
That would turn us into a real spacefaring society.
But putting an emphasis on getting on the surface of the moon leads us logically to a presentation from Jonathan Weintraub, who we had here a couple of years ago when we proposed the great competition, right? We were telling our audience here that Moon Express was a runner and Space IL was a runner. And we even had a team from Waterloo, I think, who were trying to be a runner.
We had many teams that wanted to be the runners.
Right.
And Jonathan got out of the gate first.
Okay, so Jonathan, come and fill in the story about this astonishing effort by little old Israel. So there are only 3 countries that have achieved the landing on the moon so far: the United States of America, the Soviet Union at the time, Russia today, and China. China with 1,400,000,000 people, and Russia with, what, 300 million people, and the United States with close to 400, 360.
Something like that.
Yeah, and Israel the size of the GTA.
And do we get a photo op with
yes,
our man on the moon?
Yeah, well, he can hang around with us, but Jonathan, why don't you start with your story? And Jean, why don't you snap some pictures while we're out here? Please, go ahead.
Thank you.